Hello, boys and girls. Happy Thursday. Welcome to Campcast. Campcast is the only official podcast of the Campfire Speaking Club. So, if you are interested, of course, as always, in joining the Campfire Speaking Club, just visit the page on VK, and don't forget to use promo code Campcast21 when you buy your first packet, and you will get a free lesson only available to listeners of the podcast. My guest today is Paul Newson. Paul is a very well-known teacher, practitioner. He's based in Moscow, where he runs his own language school. Recently, he's gone completely online. So he shut down his physical school and gone completely online, which is one of the things that we talk about. We talk about different approaches to teaching and learning, emotional intelligence, mental health and well-being for staff and pupils, even Brexit, our favorite topic. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoy the show. All right, 3, 2, 1. Paul, hello.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
I am very well, thank you. I was just saying before we started taping, I'm going to have my pre-podcast banana, but yeah, I didn't have time, unfortunately, in a bit of a rush today. So I will try and ask you quite a question that's going to have a long answer, and I'll try and eat it surreptitiously.
That's absolutely fine by me. And in fact, I'm going to do the same because actually, just off the camera, I've actually got my sort of cheesecake that's getting slightly warm, which I might help myself. No, I can't munch on a cheesecake whilst I'm doing a podcast. That's just impolite, isn't it?
Well, at least the banana is aesthetically pleasing to
that's what I was going to
say. So, Paul, obviously, you're for people who are involved in the EFL community, yep. You're a gentleman who requires very little introduction. However, let's not break ceremony. Would you mind just giving us a little bit of I suppose, a bio? Let us know what you're all about, and what your content's all about, and what you've been working on recently.
Yeah, sure, mate. So basically, yeah, I'm kind of in my 40s, been in Russia for 15 years. I worked for a language school, went solo about 5 years back, 4 or 5 years back. And I'm sort of a bit of jack of all trades, master of none. Well, I don't know, that's a bit rich. I'm in the middle of that expression. I've taught everything to everyone over the years. I started off in state school teaching in England, where I did my PGCE. It was actually a GTP program, to be more precise. Being paid on the job. So teaching whilst you're training at the same time. Then I was out in Germany doing a bit of teaching there at a state school where I first started teaching English as EFL, learning my own grammar for the first time. Like, that's what a verb looks like. And then coming to Russia and getting really heavily involved in EFL at a BKC language school in Moscow. Then went solo 4 years back, as I said. And I was kind of pushed into the high level areas of teaching, like the B2 and above. So the Cambridge exam suite, like the FCE, CACPE, high level IELTS and things like that. And also sort of general English. And so having taught kids, teenagers and everything, I sort of became a specialist on one hand in exam prep. Recently, I've been building seminars and webinars on emotional intelligence. That's a branch I'd like to explore a lot further in the future. So I've been in Russia for a long time. I love the place. I'm a very well laid back man, I suppose. My mantra is don't work hard, work smart. As for my future projects, I'm redoing my self-study online exam prep courses, because I used to do them in front of a board, and it's like sometimes when you look at the videos, you're like, can't quite see what he's written. So I'm going to do it all online, make it interactive. We've got like conversation classes or speaking clubs starting in the next couple of weeks. We filled up 100 places within 12 hours, which is quite impressive.
Oh, wow. Very nice.
Yeah. And so I'm going to have to expand that to more days, get some more teachers as well to help me with that. Conferences, seminars, webinars, traveling around Russia later this year. Trying to think of other conferences, webinars like writing for CAE, CPE, how to do reading, things like that. Basically, what I normally do.
So you're a man of many hats. For people listening who may not have, yeah, indeed, a man of many hats but no hair. Absolutely. Well, I can't talk. I mean, look, I've got the old Tom Hanks style receding hairline. It's only a matter of time.
Very manly.
Why, thank you.
It is very manly.
So for people listening / watching who maybe didn't pick up on that acronym at the start, PGC, that's basically that's the qualification that teachers need in order to work in a government-run school in the UK, and normally in an independent school as well, although it's not technically the law. So did you teach German?
That's right, yeah, I was teaching German.
Okay. Ausgezeichnet, as they say. I don't know. I don't speak German, by the way. That's
quite sweet. Ausgezeichnet, like excellent.
Oh, yeah, it's very nice. Yes, sorgfältig is my favorite German word to pronounce. I don't know why. Just sorgfältig, which I believe means thoroughly. Maybe I'm mistaken or I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. I don't know.
Thoroughly, like durchsichtig.
No idea. No, as I said, I don't speak German. Anyway, what was it that? Because obviously, you know, it is possible to have something resembling a career progression in the British state school system. What was it that you know, drew you away from that? Was it the call to adventure, moving to Germany or moving to Russia, or was it dissatisfaction with the British education system, or a bit of both?
The latter. If I'm going to be honest, it was the latter. Because I went into the state school system doing the sort of PGC GTP program, so the graduate training program, or the graduate teacher program. I can't remember what it stands for, 'cause it's so long ago. But yeah, sort of working on the job, because at the time Britain was crying out for like language teachers because no one wanted to be one. So they kind of offered, trust me. Yeah, exactly. So they offered like a kind of sort of golden handshake, which I never received, by the way. So I was sort of training at the same time. The support, I can honestly say, wasn't great. I was working under immense amount of pressure. Like normally when people did this so-called GTP program, you had like 8 contact hours a week, which isn't much, but then you do like lots of training, self-study, or lesson observations. I had 16 contact hours being a completely unqualified teacher, plus having to train at the same time. It was really, really heavy, and I was kind of quite annoyed with that, to be honest, because I was just like buckling under the pressure. But I kind of plowed through it to a large extent. I really enjoyed teaching the kids. The kids were the fantastic part, surprisingly, of that job. I actually didn't like the sort of system in general. I felt it to be a bit dumbed down. I felt there was a lot of backstabbing among teaching staff. A lot of one-upmanship about who gets more respect and who's more liked among their students. And I generally didn't like the environment, surprisingly. The kids were the great part. It was nice to go into that classroom, which sounds a bit ironic, because that's generally what teachers fear, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. So when I got my newly qualified teacher status, then I just quit and then went out to Germany. And I was still teaching in a state school because I had some contacts out there. And I continued doing the same thing. So I kind of appreciate that difficulty at the beginning. And even in Germany, the system was a bit better. It was a bit thorough. It was a bit more rigid, sort of a bit more disciplined. Kids had a bit more respect towards the teachers in the system to some extent. But I guess, I know it's going to sound like a bit maybe big-headed, but like even Germany, I kind of felt I had a bit more value being an Englishman. Because, you know, an Englishman teaching English in a German state school, I felt like I was needed. Where in England, I was really just pushed into the corner, like you're new, you know nothing, you're no one. It really felt like that. So in Germany, I kind of progressed pretty quickly because I got a lot of support there, a huge amount of support. And I had a private mentor who guided me through, who didn't even need to be a mentor, he just did it like voluntarily. Guided me through the whole teaching process, lesson planning, how to deal with unruly students, and it really, really, really worked. And so having dealt with large classes of kids of like, say, like 25, even 30, then moving into EFL, when some teachers go, oh, I've got a class of 10, it's too many. It's like, yeah, right. Yeah, 10's luxurious. in my book. So yeah, it was really about like the state school system. I wasn't really looked after, especially when you're fresh. You need that support because it is quite daunting, and I think that's why a lot of teachers are put off in the very early years, because of the lack of pastoral care I think the schools offered at that time, especially in my case. And so, yeah, being a bit disillusioned with the sort of I don't want to sound bad here, but the kind of politics that was involved, I didn't like it. I really did. The dumbing down, the whole league table thing, I didn't like it. So even in Germany, it was the same to some extent. And then that's when I said, after a couple of years, I want to try going to Russia and maybe just doing EFL, see what that's like. And it was the right decision.
Yeah, I was going to say, because EFL, obviously, that's not really related to the mainstream education system in Russia, of course, because what I was going to say is, obviously, because I do a lot of work with schools in the UK, as part of my job with Optimus, and a lot of the things that we hear that schools are struggling with, aside from the obvious corona related stuff at the moment, is staff well-being, is staff have too many different responsibilities, too many different hats to wear.
Big time.
Use a phrase that you can be in charge of special educational needs, safeguarding, child protection. You've got to mental health is the responsibility of everyone. Okay, that's all very well and good, but you're putting more and more responsibility onto staff, and the point being that if staff workload, staff well-being, and teacher burnout, and being thrown to the lions, when I say lions I mean parents, is your main gripe with education in the UK, moving to Russia then you would say is kind of out of the frying pan into the fire, because if anything I would say that all of those things are true, maybe in different ways, of the Russian education system too. That's something that's definitely improving at the moment, I'm very happy to say, and it does vary massively depending on which school you're talking about, but in terms of the ESL industry in Russia, that's not all rose gardens either, because we were talking earlier about there's this real trend, maybe you disagree, but there's this real trend that I've noticed in the ESL market of well, no we're talking to me about this. So so previously, if I saw like an advert for a school, right, like an English language school, it would be like English first, or it'd be International House, or whatever, like there's big famous names. You don't hear that anymore. When's the last time you heard about an English first advert? It doesn't come up anymore. What do you hear these days? You hear Paul Newson, you hear Irina Lutsenko, you hear the big, whatever the big names are, the big personalities. Maybe I'm noticing this because it's only in this past year that I've started to branch out on Russian social media as well, with my own content and all of that stuff. But do you think is there a grain of truth in that? Is there more sort of
you mean sort of the decline of the language school concept and more sort of going freelance? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and also, like, so for example, if I think about you and your brand and your content, that you as Paul Newson as a brand is much more recognizable, for me at least, than your school. I don't know if that's by design or if that's an indicator of what it is I'm talking about here, that there's more people going, as you say, going freelance and putting themselves out there.
Yeah,
as a person.
I think that's the consequence of going freelance anyway, because essentially when you kind of go like your own way, you are the brand. Like, I mean, if I'd started out on VK with some, like, I don't know, community, like, I don't know, English screwdrivers worst, I don't know, some stupid name,
.com.
maybe it wouldn't have taken off, because I think that when you build your own personal brand, you've got to have that contact with your audience. They've got to see you and who you really are, and so therefore you end up becoming the brand anyway, and that has its good and bad sides. But going back to what you said about the decline of the language school, there are still many language schools. If we talk about Russia, and especially Moscow, where I'm based, there are still quite a few language schools. A load have closed down because of coronavirus. They didn't keep money away for a rainy day, literally, bad business planning. But there are still quite a few. And I think the reason why a lot of teachers want to build their own brands, you see more of such names in the internet nowadays, is because language schools are just too heavily focused on business rather than any kind of care for the teacher. Teachers earn a pittance here in most language schools. You get a Russian who's got a CELTA or a CPE, And if they're working at I know some language schools, I don't want to mention their names, but they could be on 400 rubles an hour, maybe 700 rubles an hour, you know. And you think if you've got like a 5-year teaching diploma, CELTA, and maybe like a pass at CPE, and you're on like 600-700 rubles an hour, I mean, it's pretty insulting. I could also argue from the other side of the perspective that maybe if teachers valued themselves more, then they would basically push schools to actually say, well, you've got to pay us. But the natural consequence of how schools manage themselves in Russia is that they are forcing people to go freelance on a massive scale. And you can even see that, especially during COVID now, where so many people are like, do you know what? I'm going to start a community. I'm going to start a speaking club. I'm going to start writing marathons, or I'm going to like do a community on like posting information about young learners or something. It's everywhere now on such a huge scale. So what's kind of interesting is that with the mismanagement of language schools, for the most part, the freelance market is now completely and utterly saturated. That's the downside of it.
Big time, yeah.
Big time, massively saturated. So it's like major competition on, like, you know, standing out and building yourself a brand and stuff is really.
But that's good for me because I've got loads of people to interview. Yeah. Yeah, that's so true.
Many of us native speakers. That's the thing. There's not many of us.
Yeah, there's a few of us around. I mean, I can't think of any names off the top of my head, but certainly some people who've been on this podcast who it's interesting looking at, you know, the mistakes that not only ESL schools have made, but also mainstream schools. You know, I think Dmitry Medvedev put it quite well when he said, so I don't know if you saw this, but it was a big sort of hullabaloo a few years ago when, you know, Medvedev was getting hounded by members of the public at a press conference.
But he says that there's no more money or something.
No. You're thinking that's the pension thing. Was in, I think that was in Crimea somewhere, and it said there's денег нет, но вы держитесь. He's apart from the stand-up guys who I know that you're friendly with, I think he's Russia's #1 comic. I'm sure that they'll agree with me there. This was something similarly amusing, is when people were lambasting him about teachers' salaries. And his response was, well, you know, a creative teacher will always find a way to make money. Now, he was right. Not for the right reasons.
Yes.
He was right. And so teachers are now saying, okay, Dima, fuck you then. And I'm going to go and make my own money. Bye. And now all of the quality teachers, all of the top professionals, they are leaving the mainstream schools like that. And they're leaving the ESL industry and they're going out on their own. Unless you're going to, and you know, the government their government run schools, the government can pay them whatever they want. You know, don't go and work in a school if you don't want to earn no money. But at the same time, the Ministry of Education needs to say, okay, shit, we actually need to invest some money in schools. Otherwise, we're not going to get good quality recruits. And just to clarify, I am not by any means saying that people who still work in mainstream schools are low quality teachers. I think they are undervalued teachers. But the more that you allow this dynamic of underpaying staff to continue, the more this is going to happen.
Absolutely correct. I mean, when you look at a lot of state schools, and I've been to many in my 15 years in Russia, like absolute loads. I mean, you're absolutely right. Many of the schools or the teachers are undervalued on a massive scale, like hugely. I think those who do maintain a level of like C1 and above who work in state schools do it because of the passion. They like being there. They like being with the kids. They just kind of like it. But you don't find many of them. And again, it's not to kind of sort of devalue what people are doing. Because essentially it's like, you know, in my case, when I was working at this language school in Moscow, because students were paying more and more, like, you know, on a sort of quarterly basis, his prices were going up all the time. Teachers weren't getting an increase in their salary. And so, of course, you know, matching the level of inflation and living costs, what we had 10 years ago compared to what we had, say, like 4 years ago, it's like that. We just couldn't afford anything anymore. So we're forced to actually go and do extra classes, like, you know, having privates. It's a very common thing for a lot of language school teachers. You do your contractual hours, you do your privates. But when you're not getting paid enough and you actually have that feeling like, you know what, I'm actually earning so much more teaching how I want to teach my own way privately, than say working in a state school or a language school where you're going to be inclined to kind of follow that route. That's the thing. And I've always said this to a lot of language schools that, you know, they need to pay teachers more to keep them. But they rely on that, you know, that idea of there's a massive turnover. You don't have to train teachers very often. You get some language schools that have their own method, like Berlitz in Germany, for example, in parts of Europe. They have their own books to follow. They don't need to train teachers. But again, it really reduces the kind of quality. Hence why people like myself and a few others who sort of tried to go freelance, build a brand to actually maintain that. That's the thing. It's just, this is a big response to bad management, theoretically. You know, whether it's on a government scale or in a language school, this is what, because if I actually had an increase in my salary to feel comfortable in Russia, I wouldn't have left BKC. I would still be there, and I wouldn't be here on VK.
Yeah, it's tricky, but yeah, now they're getting the comeuppance now.
Yeah.
Or it's the equivalent of the brain drain, but in the education sector. So what's a solution? So obviously you mentioned earlier, you're working on, various courses and projects to highlight issues of staff well-being, and also to look at emotional intelligence. And now I know that me and you, we've gone back and forth on this before about EQ. You know my position. I'm not a big fan of the term EQ, but what you mean when you say EQ, I don't think you're saying that it's a type of intelligence. It's just you're using this name because it's like a well-known. So it's a useful handle, let's call it. So what exactly do you mean by emotional intelligence? And
emotional intelligence, yeah. I mean, I do agree. It's an interesting name, and it's like you could have called it just cucumbers and tomatoes, and still basically mean the same thing. In a nutshell, it's basically having a developed level of empathy. So the ability to understand what you're feeling, which you can't control what you're feeling because it's natural, but to at least control the reactions of what you're feeling, and which helps you to understand the feelings of others and to control those reactions as well. So you can use that in situations like in the classroom, how you respond to people, to help build confidence and charisma, which is absolutely vital, which honestly I think is one of the most sort of lacking things among teachers these days. Just by having a English certificate doesn't guarantee you're going to be a competent teacher. That has to come with a lot of hard work as well. And so emotional intelligence, it's like a fad at the moment, isn't it? It's like you see people running everywhere. I'm into emotional intelligence. For me, I do like to call it empathy. It really is about kind of developing the sense of self-talk, thinking further than the end of one's nose, and just sort of trying to understand a bit more. So if I can give an example, when we talk about building a rapport with our students, right now, we often, I read articles on this, and even on VK regular, how to build a rapport, ask them questions about their hobbies and, about their families, or, what they like to do on weekends. Like, that's not building a rapport. That's something which is very, very superficial. If you're teaching Russian teenagers, building a rapport is to go even further and deeper. So emotional intelligence is like to understand what is going on so you can respond to your students appropriately because you understand them and their feelings. So a lot of Russian kids, for example, are expected to get 5s. A lot, not always, but a lot, and they strive to get 5s. They do what they can. They copy homework from each other because I know, like, if they one letter out of place, they probably get a 4. And that bothers a lot of Russian students. They can be told by their teachers that they're stupid. That does happen, and I've seen it. A lot of Russian kids after school go to do these extra classes, even classes on weekends. They're tired, and these are kids like 11, 12 years old, where a lot of English kids are kind of, out playing or like playing computer, but Russian kids are studying. So this is emotional intelligence. You see what's going on around you. You process the information. You understand that Russian kids have a pretty insane life at a very young age. It's pretty intensive. So when they come into your classroom, rather than kind of sort of talk down to them, okay, here's a piece of paper, catch, it's like, I'm 13, but I've just read War and Peace. An emotionally intelligent person would kind of bring them up to their level and understand what plight they're going through, and adjust their behavior and lessons accordingly. And therefore expect a much better bond between student and teacher, which results in much more efficiency and thus progress.
Yeah, it's I'm sure you've had plenty of these types of students who I remember one in particular was a 6-year-old girl who She was the epitome of what you're just describing. Her parents were just mad. I was going to say what their parents did, but this is a very famous person in Tumen, so it'll give it away who it is. So I won't say it. But
Hush, hush. Yes.
yeah, I'll tell you afterwards. But her parents would take her to English twice a week. Would take her to Spanish. They were one of these people that they had a Mexican nanny who would speak Spanish to the kid the whole time. The gymnastics, horse riding, everything, non-stop. Did they ask her what she was interested in? Probably not. And yeah, this kid who was just, was a little bit lifeless behind the eyes because she was just she was going through the motions every day. She wasn't there to learn necessarily. She was there to make her parents happy. And, ideally you'd want to do both of those things at the same time, right?
Yep.
But
Yep.
yeah, it's really tough. And the second thing as well, as to your point, I'm 13 and I've just read War and Peace. That's and I know you said that half jokingly, but there is a deeper problem there. And this I talked about this once in a speaking club, and I pissed off quite a lot of people saying it, but I'll say it again now. My podcast,
Let's do it again. Let's piss off people again.
Yeah. So there's this thing that. So first of all, about Soviet education, there's this line that people have about the USSR, saying in the Soviet times we had the best education in the world and it was free. I'm sorry, that's not true. The Soviets were extremely good at educating engineers, physicists, mathematicians. There were, at school, certainly at university, it could be argued as well, but there were certainly big problems with the Soviet education system. One of them being, which still persists to this day, ideologically oriented topics at university, which are mandatory in the first year. For example, you go to university, you're an aspiring physicist, right? You go to university, you've got to study the history of the Communist Party and Marx and Engels and all the rest of it before you can proceed, which is a top. And the equivalent today would be, I want to study engineering at university, but then in the first year, no, you've got to study philosophy and PE and English and all of this nonsense, which you didn't sign up for, didn't ask for, and don't want. This is what happens when you have a top-down education system, as you do under socialism, or indeed in Russia today for some reason. And the result of that is that no one takes those topics seriously, and no wonder. And so either the people who could have been great physicists either drop out and emigrate to America, or they cheat. Now, this is one of the reasons, it's not the only reason, but it is one of the reasons for the epidemic of cheating at every stage of the Russian education system.
I have another reason why the cheating exists. It's quite interesting. I can honestly say, as for the Soviet education system, it's quite interesting what you're saying. This is not a kind of like, I'm going to like cover my ass here. I don't know much about it. I know a bit, but I do know that like we even boasted as well. I think when we harp on back to our past, even in Britain, it's like in the 60s, we had the best form of education. It's absolutely shite now, which is kind of partially true in my opinion. I'm just really like, I have scars. But what I've noticed in Russia, which is quite interesting, is just this kind of, and again, it is maybe because of the communism, but there seems to be in a lot of Russian state schools a lack of a system, a lack of a concise, cohesive system which benefits everyone. So like when you look at, for example, the homework that gets set, by teachers of various subjects, there is no system at all. Where in Britain there was. It's like I was even told you can only give homework on these days because these students have other teachers, they give it on that day. And like it's like a huge planning process on an unimaginable scale, right? Which is great, by the way, because it gives everyone a fighting chance. Here, it's like every teacher thinks that their subject is more important than the other. The amount of homework that's kind of given is impossible for students to achieve and like complete properly. So like even my daughter, who's like 13, the amount that she gets, she can't physically do it. And especially when like a mum sends her to all these classes after school. So she gets home at 7, she's tired, she's got to do homework, she's got to do extra classes on a Saturday. And of course, for example, again, even the marking system in Russian schools, is not cohesive. There's no what's the word? I can't even speak English anymore.
There's no centrality. Is that what you're talking
There's
about?
no consistency. So,
Well,
for
yeah,
example,
curriculum management is what we're talking about.
yeah.
So curriculum management is one of the things that I work with schools to support them. Not saying that I'm a curriculum designer. I don't work for the Department for Education or anything like that. But it's certainly one of the things that I help schools with. It's the thing with the curriculum in Russia is, and so as well, I'll cover my ass as well and say another thing about the Soviet education system is that whereas it's not true to say that the education system in the USSR was the best in the world, it is true to say that the Soviets, as I said, were first of all very good at educating the hard sciences, as in physics, engineering, etc., notwithstanding all of the other complications I mentioned at university. Second of all, the history of the success of Soviet education, more so at the start of the 20th century, is is so-called likhbyaz. So likhbyaz was this like campaign to reduce, as I'm sure you know, illiteracy and to essentially educate the populace. Now, as far as as of course you know, I'm no fan of collectivism, but as far as communist ideas go, that's a pretty good one. Give the devil its due. That's a good idea. The idea of spreading education to the masses, and it was incredible. It is one of the greatest feats of public education policy that has ever been implemented, not just in the 20th century, ever. There was a population of illiterate farmer peasants who almost in a matter of years became a reading nation, and in a matter of decades went to space. That's no joke. That happened, and it was because of the might of the education program which was implemented. Now, where it sort of fell down after that was, this idea of top-down curriculum management, this idea of teaching languages as if they're sciences. That's where I've got a problem with Soviet and indeed Russian education, and I would love to see reform. Now, as regards your point about homework and about curriculum management and curriculum planning, that's a big problem. That's a big problem because you've got, first of all, kids who can't do their homework. You've got parents helping said kids to do their homework constantly, and you've got, I'm sure your daughter is an example of this, you've got parents paying for extra tutors to teach their. Now, that is not a good sign curriculum wise. The fact that you need to outsource public education to families, that's a big problem, and it's a sign of the fact that the curriculum isn't correctly planned. So what do I mean by that? So there's this, there's like quite a common story you hear. I think I told you about this one before, where, so for example, there's this famous Russian professor who emigrates to America, and he starts teaching at Harvard or whatever. He teaches at university, and he says, oh my God, I'm so shocked at these kids at an American university who are learning, whatever topic in first year mathematics. For us, that's like Gothic class, that's and
here all the time.
Again, it sounds impressive. It sounds like, oh, look, our Russian kids are doing what Americans do at university. Like, I'm sorry, that's not quite how that works. That's not a symbol that Russians are, that they have something in their DNA. They're genetically more intelligent than the rest. It's the curriculum is too hard. It's too complex. That's why everyone cheats. That's why parents have to help their kids do their homework, and that's why schools can't teach the entire program. Tutors have to help.
Yes, absolutely, exactly. I think when you're sort of pushed into a corner as a kid, then you've got no choice but to cheat, and that's why it happens. Because you've got no other choice. That's why, when teenagers came to my classes quite often, and and they seemed a bit lethargic, rather than sort of push them and go, come on, I just kind of left them to it. They kind of cheered up after some time, and got involved in work, but I just kind of understood what they were going through. it's just insane. You know, it's like it is quite a daft curriculum. It isn't well thought out. It's constantly being changed. Teachers have got their hands tied behind their back big time. And also what's happening in Russia is the same as in England, that if a teacher steps out of line slightly, you're gone. You can be punished quite severely these days.
Yeah, and when you say step out of line, that could be like, you know, take a photo on a beach with a bikini. A teacher got fired because of that.
Exactly. And I know quite a horrific story that happened recently in a school here in Moscow, where a girl was getting bullied and two kids posted some pictures online of her, and the teacher kind of reported this to the parents and then to the police, and the teacher got fired for it because the administration wanted to keep it like quiet. And I was like, that's insane. Hoping it would just go away.
That is insane. That if that happened in a UK school, if that teacher didn't report it, she would be fired.
Exactly.
If child protection as soon as you have a child, as soon as you have a safeguarding concern,
exactly,
you need to report it, and there's this whole chain of command. Exactly. But you know it, you were a teacher. So,
yeah, exactly. So I kind of understand. So this is the thing, like, you know, for me in Russia, why I kind of love this country at the same time and want to do my best as if I'm going on some kind of crusade to help change it, because I see what's wrong in play. I see what's great. I also see where it can be improved. And if, for example, like a curriculum improvement, and also that kids actually have a fighting chance of doing the work properly, and parents back off a bit, and actually let them, you know, learn their responsibility by doing homework themselves, and that they fail sometimes as well, more often than once a year, then I think things are going to change pretty quickly. But it's definitely have a much more systematic, fair, consistent approach to providing the curriculum. For me, also, what's kind of quite interesting is, like, you know, when I was listening to you just then, for me, it's like when you talked about, like, you know, the university qualifications that people have, or the courses they do, even EFL, when people go to all of these kind of conferences and get all these certificates, one thing which is really important for me is about how that information is implemented, and in most cases it isn't. You know, it's like you can actually read a book on, let's just say, emotional intelligence. You know, you can actually take Jordan Peterson, who we're a fan of, you know, Mark Manson and others. You can actually read a load of these books, and basically it goes in here and out here. And you just don't implement what you've learned at all. And I think that applies to a lot of sort of state school education in Russia, unfortunately. So they kind of taught like the kind of theoretical base, but about the implementation for daily life, for daily survival skills, it's not there. You see what I mean? It's kind of lacking a bit. Some Russians might kind of kill me for saying this, but it's just the case. And I can tell you why very quickly why this is interesting. If you look at the most recent OECD PISA test results, you know the PISA test, right? It's like Russia, like on all the sort of subjects, resulted sort of slightly on average, slightly below average, right? But also what was interesting in Russia has most people who have been through higher education for any nation in the world, according to OECD PISA test. So it's kind of quite interesting. You've got like this nation who have apparently the most educated people in the world. Then when you look at
it depends how you define higher education.
Well, they have qualifications. That's the thing. They have their bachelors, their masters, their PhDs. So Russians have more of those than any other country in the world. And then you kind of think, okay, so when you look at then like let's not like lie here, the state of the economy, entrepreneurship, you think, okay, so if there are so many qualified people, then how is this information and these qualifications implemented into daily life, into like life skills? And that's what I find particularly interesting. So it's like when I look at EFL, for example, when I get teachers applying for jobs in my school, because I'm on a massive recruiting drive at the moment. And some teachers say, I have this certificate from this webinar, I have this certificate from this seminar. I'm like, great.
Doesn't tell me anything.
Doesn't tell me anything. Have you implemented it? Have you actually improved your teaching because of it? Do you see what I mean? And that's what really, really important for me. So I'm really into this whole kind of notion that, like, well, just because you read something or study something, it doesn't mean that, like, you can, if it's not implemented, it's going to make a difference. And that's the thing. That's just, I mean, I might be hated for saying that, but like, there we go.
No, I wouldn't say so at all. I think that's a completely uncontroversial thing to say. I'm right behind you on that. I think that, you know, that's one of the big trends in education in the UK, certainly at the moment, is a push towards a more skills for life oriented curriculum, looking at employability, mental health, resilience, that kind of thing. And even Ofsted, for anyone listening, Ofsted is like Rosovnadzor, is the equivalent inspecting body that inspects schools to make sure that they are compliant with standards. Ofsted has changed its inspection framework to take that into account. Not many schools are being inspected at the moment because of Corona, but yeah, that's going to change fairly soon. Ofsted are rubbing their dirty little hands and getting ready to do some inspections. On the topic of dirtiness, I saw you got banned from YouTube again.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, Paul, what have you done? What is racism, homophobia? What's going on?
All of those together. Yeah, basically it was like some kind of Russian vlogger, and I just happened to come across a video on YouTube, and it was talking about, like, some guy was interviewing some other guy talking about racism in Russia, and it was like they were sort of trying to make it seem as if like Russia's a kind of like really sort of racist place. And I was like, for God's sake, it's like the same what the BBC tried to do to Russia before the Football World Cup. Like when they sent, for example, Frankie Boyle, you know, that famous Scottish comedian, he did a program for the BBC where he wanted to kind of show what like Russia was really like, you know, just before the football tournament started. And he chose to go, I think, somewhere down south, like Rostov-na-Don, with some famous Russian rapper who's like half Ukrainian, sees himself as a Cossack, quite nationalistic, and then to St. Petersburg to interview some gay people in the sort of local community, and who basically make it out that they're being attacked all the time, which is, if that's the case, is horrible. But I was like, it's kind of cherry picking a bit, isn't it? You know, why not just go further afield? You know, show that Russians are actually very tolerant people. And people started like moaning at me, saying, "Oh, so you're racist then? So you're protecting racists?" I'm like, no. And some of these, I think, were English guys, if I'm not mistaken. And I said, like, tolerance is about like the tolerance of an opinion. That, you know, people might disagree with you, and just because you're offended doesn't mean that you're right. I think that's Ben Shapiro quote.
Facts don't care about your feelings. I think
facts don't care about your feelings. And I said that, like, for example, I said, well, this guy, I think it was English, was kind of talking about, like, you know, homophobia and racism. And I said, why is it in England that we are, like, I don't like to use the word racist, maybe because racism is about race, but maybe intolerant towards people of different class? Why is it that a lot of English men are scared to publicly announce that they build plastic planes and tanks for a hobby, because many of them see it as a loser hobby? Many of them don't openly admit it. Why is it that, like, for example, like if a grown man likes to build Lego cities in an artistic way, that he's not going to do that? He's not going to say that openly aloud in Britain, because he's going to get the piss taken out of him. Where, you know, in Russia, you could say that to the most gorgeous Russian model, and she'd be like, "You're amazing. You have hobbies. That's amazing. You're like, that's fantastic. I want to see." You're like, really? And so the thing is, Russians are extremely tolerant. Now, I gave an example today. I had some guests over, and I said, when I first arrived in Russia, I went to do this kind of spring camp, and me and this American guy, we went into the local town, Pokrov, like about 100 kilometers out of Moscow. And this like couple just heard that we were speaking English, and like we got talking. They invited us to their house, right, that evening. So we got a taxi, went there, and they laid out this huge feast, you know, and they were working in the local Alyonka chocolate factory, so probably not earning much, but they laid out a table for us. It was just incredible. And we felt so ashamed, because in England, that would not happen. You know, that would practically never happen. That you get some Russians like, "Oh, come in. I have no idea who you are. I'm interested." It would almost never happen. Do you see what I mean?
It would happen in Ireland, not in England.
Not in England.
Yeah. I'm surprised that happens in Moscow, because like I don't know. I've never lived in Moscow. I've obviously visited Moscow several times, but in Siberia, not even in Tyumen, because in Tyumen there's a lot of foreigners. But like, for example, in Nizhny, like if someone heard you speak English, it was like, I mean, I'm sure you've been in the situation hundreds of times when it's just the same old questions, like, "Oh, where are you from? What are you doing here?
Why did you come to Russia?"
Yeah, no, yeah. That's the most, it's the most difficult question to answer. But again, not in an aggressive way, in a completely friendly, curious, open, tolerant, as you correctly say, way. But But yeah, in Moscow, I'm surprised that still happens, because like, is it? I can't imagine it's that uncommon to, see foreign people in Moscow.
Oh, there's
It
loads
still
of
happens.
There's loads. Yeah, you some. It depends where you are. If you're in the suburbs, you may get stared at. I think in Moscow, people are still kind of quite interested. They kind of look at you, so especially in my gym. But I think because of it being a big metropolis, people tend to be a bit more paranoid of each other. So they might be interested, but they just don't approach you. That's the thing. Where in the sticks they do. Like when I was in Archangelsk recently, like happened several times. Walk down the street, like speaking on the phone, and they just kind of like stare like that. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I actually said to someone once, I came to Russia and learned to be tolerant. That really is the case for me, because I remember one moment. I'll just share this with you if you don't mind. There's a metro station, Teatralnaya, that has a long sort of tunnel from the station up to the Red Line, right in the center. And in those days, you could actually, be a busker. And I used to walk past some buskers. And one time there was like a guy in front of me, like quite ahead in front of me. And it's like this big, bald, like fascist, skinhead looking guy, kind of like me. And he stopped, opened his bag, pulled out a violin and started playing this like insanely advanced music. And I was like, I did not expect that. I had some idea that this guy was some dangerous skinhead or something like that, but he's a professional musician. And even like in the gym, when I see some of these guys who are like what, like the muscly, majorly on steroids, whatever. And after a couple of months, you get to know them and you talk to them, and then they speak perfect English. They're doctors or professors, and you're like, geez, I didn't expect that. And so I think that, like, racism exists no matter where you are. The moment you share the same ground with someone who's a bit different, there's going to be some thoughts. That happens everywhere. But I don't like what the BBC does. I don't like some of the views of Westerners towards Russia. It's really unfair. There are idiots everywhere. Because I know that Russians like to be like, we're the worst country in the world and everything's shit here and stuff like that. We have racism. We have the most alcoholics. It's like, it's really not that bad. It exists, but it's not as bad as they think. But what annoys me the most, what happened on YouTube, which kind of got me banned, was when it really came to the boil, was when I accused this guy of being racist himself, and I think it was his channel. And because I said, it's the arrogance of the West and arrogance of us to assume that everyone has to function according to our personal cultural frames of reference. So it's like, well, Russia has their own orthodoxy religion. They're quite conservative, mostly, for the most part, traditional, family-oriented. And so for us as English people to say, well, Russia needs to stop this and Russia needs to do that, it's like, we shouldn't be saying that. It is arrogance of the highest extreme. And that's what I was trying to say on this YouTube channel. Maybe I didn't articulate myself well enough. But that's essentially why they just
think, though, that's getting dangerously close to cultural relativism. I mean, by the same logic, could we not say, that the Saudis shouldn't chop people's hands off and shouldn't throw gays off buildings?
Well, we can say that. That's the thing. But I mean, the fact is that, like, why do we? But we don't say that. We just seem to say it to Russia. That's the thing.
Yeah, fair enough. If what you're saying is that there's loads of places in the world which are intolerant and that have homophobia, that have racism, why are you focusing on Russia so much? Yeah, okay, I see what you mean.
It's because they look like us. That's why. Simple as that. It's because they look like us, but they're not. They're kind of a mixture of Asians and Europeans, the Slavic. It's strange that we kind of, the media-wise bully Russia, but we don't really take on anybody else, especially say Saudi Arabia, for example,
yeah, I mean, we're much more concerned about selling fighter jets to Saudi Arabia.
Well, here, let me give you an example, but I don't want to get too political on here for you because I don't want to kill your channel. Do you remember?
No, trust me, I don't care. I'm much more interested in having quality conversations with people than getting views. But if people want to watch them, that's fine by me.
That's good. But like we love everyone. But it's like Stephen Fry. I love Stephen Fry. I think he's an intelligent guy. He's in the. I think he's gay, isn't he? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, he is.
Much so, yes. He
not
quite likes other girls, as he phrases it.
Like, do you remember when Russia introduced that anti-gay propaganda law shortly before the Sochi Olympics, right? And Stephen Fry was one of the advocates of boycotting the Sochi Olympics at a protest of Russia's anti-gay stance. And I wrote an article for The Guardian that got me banned as well. From there, I'm banned from there as well. Because I said, dear Stephen Fry, now I do understand that we want the world to be in peace. We want to be tolerant of people's differences as well. But to kind of, say and preach that we will need to teach Russians to appreciate homosexuality, I said, there are Russians who don't have hot water for a month. There are Russians in parts of the country who don't receive a salary for a couple of months. I know some doctors in Moscow who work because of the passion, but they don't get paid as often as they should. There are Russians who, depending on the region they live in, don't have proper plumbing, don't have proper electricity. They get their water from the well. Some of them work in the most extreme conditions in factories. They're struggling to get by in some parts of this country. I don't think they're going to put that aside and think, okay, like the fact that we're starving, I haven't got my salary, do you know what? But let's think about this agenda right now.
I agree. I agree to a point that, to say that, for example, I don't agree that this, anti-gay propaganda law is a good idea, which I personally don't. I don't like it one bit. But to say then the leap of logic to say, therefore boycott the Sochi Olympics, which has nothing to do with it, is organized by a separate government department, doesn't have anything to do with it. It's like the people who gay clubs in America stopped ordering Smirnoff vodka because which is a British brand of vodka, by the way. So it's so silly, so silly.
But the point is this is the thing. It's like it's punishing the people as a whole. That's the problem. Russians are some of the nicest people on the planet. They have soul. They're so hearty. They're just like, like I said about being invited to these strangers' house to have a buffet. They are some of them. I've been here for 15 years. I'm here because these people are just absolutely fantastic. I love them. I'd die for a lot of these people. I really would. And so when I kind of hear that, like, we expect Russia to behave according to our standards, it for me, even though, of course, cultures are different, some are better than others. Some people, it's not nice to bully people of minorities or whatever. I'm against that. However, this whole kind of arrogance of dictating to each other about, how to live, not understanding what is truly going on. I know what goes on in Russia. I've been here for such a long time. And that's what just annoyed me on a huge scale. When Stephen Fry didn't say anything about Saudi Arabia or Sudan, where they execute homosexuals, for example, even Iran. Why Russia?
To be fair, that was part of a series, a 4-part series about he went to Brazil and went to other.
That was way after this, though, at the time.
Okay. What was it called? I forgot now. The Out There. That's the documentary is called Out There. Yeah. It's there's an interesting dynamic between. So the word conservative is a tricky word because
we get very political here, don't we? EFL to politics.
Oh yeah, fuck it. We talk about all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, cards on the table. I'm a guy who's probably more right of center than some other people. So, but I wouldn't call myself like a conservative, as in like a Tory conservative. The Conservative Party is the party that is closest to my political beliefs, but I'm not really a Tory. If I were in America, I would be what the Americans call a conservative. So I'm a traditional libertarian, like small government right winger, basically. I believe that people should be free to pursue their own life projects. And as the famous quote goes, my freedom to swing my fist stops where the other man's nose starts. So basically you can do whatever you want. And unless you're hurting anyone or damaging them or damaging their property, you can go ahead and do whatever you want. Now, so at the same time, that means that I can personally believe that, I believe that the nuclear family is very important, and it should be the center of our social moral portrait. I believe that, for example, that some element of hierarchy is necessary, even desirable in society. I believe in laissez-faire economics and all the rest of it. But so then, if you look at more of like the Russian brand of conservatism, that is less of a libertarian conservatism. It's more of an authoritarian conservatism. That's where I've got a problem with it. The fact that you can go ahead and believe, if in your own private way, that the traditional nuclear family is more desirable than, for example, by way, okay, just an example, than two men adopting a child. You can go ahead and believe that, but you shouldn't legislate it. It's your own private business. The moment that you then make government legislation to say, not only can you not adopt a child, which is okay, fair enough, we can have a debate about that. That's okay, good point. But then to say you can't even propagandize, what are you talking about? And this goes full circle. It's the same with education. It's the government treating people like their children. Let people make their own decisions.
Yeah,
you don't want to swing the sword of government power too broadly. It's a very, very powerful tool. Be careful with it.
I have nothing to say because I completely agree. I really completely agree with everything you just said. I'm exactly the same beliefs, completely.
Yeah, that's so that's my critique really of conservatism in that particular brand, in that particular stripe, is
especially when it becomes reactionary. I think in some parts of Russian government it is reactionary. That's where it's very dangerous.
For sure.
I do believe that people should have the right to make their own decisions for their family, but there is a degree of government control as well if it's in any way competent, which unfortunately for most cases,
well, it never is. That's
never
the
is.
definition of the thing with government control. People don't. I think Russians or people who live in more authoritarian societies. Now, just don't get me wrong, authoritarian doesn't mean dictatorship. I'm not talking about North Korea here. I'm talking about governments which are quicker to impose laws on the country than more libertarian governments. People don't realize what government power actually means, because so let's say, for example, you're registered as IPE, so you have certain obligations. What happens if you don't pay your taxes? Well, you will get a letter from the freelance. What happens if you ignore the letter? Well, probably like a year later, but let's say like 6 months later, you'll get another letter, slightly more strongly worded. If you ignore that, maybe you'll get a phone call. If you ignore that, then someone's going to knock on your door. And if you keep ignoring, at the end of that process, someone will come to your house with a gun and lead you away in handcuffs. So government authority at the end of the line is always underlined by the threat of violence. That's why so government mandate it's a completely different beast. It's not the same as me as a parent telling my children how to behave. It's not the same as me as a teacher reprimanding a student. It's different because the government got guns, and they'll put you in prison, and they can and will and do. So the question is, you've got a gun. Paul Newson has got a gun right now. Everyone duck. Now the question is, would I use a gun?
It's illegal. I shouldn't have it, but it's there.
We've got a Kalash behind you. Jesus. Okay, so you've got that gun, right?
Yeah.
Would you use that gun to stop a murder? I would. I'm guessing you would too.
Oh, it's one of those. That's a tough question. I mean, wow, it's getting very interesting, this podcast. I love it. Would I stop a murder by using that?
Well, the question is, would you advocate the use of violence to stop someone else being killed? I'm getting most people.
Well, yeah, you'd have to.
Yeah, yes. Of course.
Yeah,
now, would I use that gun to stop a rape? Yeah, I would.
Oh, definitely. Rapists should be executed.
Agreed.
And
would
those
I use
who
that gun?
Allegations should also be executed.
But here's the question, though: would I use that gun to build a library? Ooh, that's more difficult. Like because again, using taxpayers' money and collecting that tax is underlined by the threat of violence. There is a gun on the table in that. So you have to be super duper careful about how you use government power, and the slightest misstep it could be a free fall to tyranny. So,
well, I kind of feel that's what's happening back in Britain at the moment. Maybe I've just been brainwashed by the news, but it seems like, especially in America, I'm worried. I'm worried for our futures back in those countries.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, I am. I am, and I'm not, because when you look at the rise in all of this, crazy woke stuff, identity politics, the radical left, all of that, and of course the radical right as well. Let's not forget about those fuckers. When you see that, yes, that Is it on the rise? Well, the radical left, okay, maybe yes. The radical right, probably not so much. But in response to that, in response to all of the fake news and all of the nonsense and all of the woke outrage, there has been a massive counterculture in mocking the woke, in satirizing them, in fact checking your news. There's been a massive counterculture of don't get your news on Facebook, basically, on scrutinizing news sources, where, BBC reality check. For all, me and you have obviously got a thing or two to say about BBC, of course.
Oh God, yeah.
Rightly so.
Cancel them.
Yeah, but then in their defense, they have now they've got this new thing called reality check. And like, if you said 7 years ago, you're reading a BBC article, and you said 7 years ago, for example, like, what, is this been fact checked? Has this been reality checked? You'd think you were insane. Like, what are you talking about? It's BBC News. It must be true. But now even the BBC says, look, okay, we need to respond to this counterculture. So I'm not super pessimistic about it. Yeah,
I think these groups. This is what my old man says. He says that they're just very vocal. He says it kind of gives the impression that it's so widespread, but it's not as bad as people think. They're just very vocal. That's the thing. But still, I don't know. It seems to kind of infected every part of life. You just see it everywhere, and I think that it is having an effect on many. It's turned a lot of people into self-entitled little snowflakes. No one listens anymore. There's this rush to be right rather than actually have a proper discussion, and even sometimes understanding you're wrong and actually moving to the other side of the argument because you realize that you've been corrected. I think that's a wonderful and very, very noble thing to do. I love being told I'm wrong, but I talk crap sometimes.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah,
I agree that I like to be told, not that you're talking crap.
Yeah, there we go. Kiss, kiss. I don't know. I don't know where I feel, because this is the interesting thing, mate. Being here in Russia, I just follow what I see on the news. I try to follow some independent sources, but they're, again, never independent. They're everyone's personal ideology. And I'm so kind of out of it here in Russia. Do you know what I mean? It's really kind of hard to sort of truly know what's kind of going on. I know everything about Russia, what's happening here, but back in Britain, I have to kind of go on what my friends and my family tells me, kind of thing. But they tend to kind of, this is the English thing, exaggerate and blow things out of proportion. So, like, with Brexit, all my friends are telling me, like, Paul, by the way, the island's sinking right now. It is literally sinking after Brexit. Everyone's going to die. We're not going to have an economy. Everything's going to shit. It's like,
we're adrift.
Yes, exactly. Drift into the Atlantic, hit an iceberg and sink.
Well, we did have a massive economic dip, but not because of Brexit, but because of coronavirus.
Yeah,
which was pretty bad.
Can I ask, were you for Brexit?
The Brexit's a tricky one. So originally, when the referendum came along, I was not an original supporter of Brexit. My simple logic was I was simply thought, bit of a hassle. Let's just stay in. Can't be bothered to leave. Which is not much of an argument, but that it is kind of an argument. And B, a very, albeit selfish motivation that I wanted the possibility. This was still when I was thinking about maybe moving to Czech Republic, or going and working somewhere in the EU, and I could bring Dasha along, like that. And don't have to worry about visas or anything, and any such nonsense. So that was my original thinking. So obviously 2016 happened, Brexit came along, and it was a victory for the Brexit for the Brexiteers. Not a huge one, but it was 52% in favor. I thought, okay, now there were a lot of cries from the other side after that, the result of that referendum, which said, well, hang on, that's not fair. There's been a lot of right-wing misinformation. There's been the famous bus with the however many millions of pounds extra for the NHS, and there was lots of lies and propaganda. And like, okay, fair enough, that that there's actually some truth in that. There was a lot of kind of dishonest Dominic Cummings style stuff, propaganda coming from the Brexit side. But so my logic was, there's going to be a general election in, when was it, 2018 was, I can't remember. all these years just blend into one now. There's going to be a general election. And so this is it. This is the second referendum. This is what we were all waiting for. If you now, this has been in the public forum, it's been debated, we've had the discussion, all of this propaganda has been debunked. This is it. This is the proper referendum. If you support Brexit, vote Conservative. If you don't, vote Liberal Democrat. If you're some sort of communist, vote Labour. All jokes aside, basically it was Conservatives versus everyone else.
Yeah.
And the Conservatives won by a huge majority, one of the biggest majorities we've ever had. And that was it. I said, okay, we're done. We're done. I've got nothing else. That's it. The argument is over. You cannot go against the will of the people.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no other argument that needs to be had. If you try and go, because there would be some legitimacy there. If let's say Labour had won, then okay, they ran on the election promise of running a second referendum. Okay, that's political mandate. But the Tories won. I'm sorry, that's it. It's been voted on. You can't go against that. To do so would be an act of government tyranny. So I'm just trying to be, Paul, I'm trying to be optimistic about it. I'm not going to whinge about it. And I'm saying, okay, it's a fresh start. Let's see what we can do. Let's get some trade deals on the go. We'll see what's what.
I actually voted. I'm very similar in that respect, because I actually initially wanted to stay purely for selfish reasons, about like having to go through the fast lines at airports as an EU citizen. I like the fact you can travel without, visas. And I thought, I love that, because, when I used to live in Germany, it's fantastic. So economy, don't care about that. I care about what benefits me. I think most people voted for purely selfish reasons, or kind of just reactionary reasons. Like, EU, we're like insular British people, like sod them, we're going to leave anyway, primarily based on lies, but I didn't really care. But then, like you said, I thought, well, even if we did stay, would it change anything? Because I do believe the EU is a sinking ship, slowly but surely. I think they're kind of rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. That's what I think, because things don't look good at the moment. But I still kind of also at the same time think, well, do you know what? If I want Britain to go its own way, I just want to see if Britain can do it. Like, the sort of Battle of Britain kind of mentality. Like, can we actually manage ourselves if we have become so pathetic as a nation, so dumb, no industry, bad trade, and we sing, well, do you know what? Then we deserve it. Then maybe a crisis will basically get us rethinking about ourselves again. But I'd like to know that if we do sink, that it is primarily all of our own doing, rather than done by the EU. Do you see what I mean? So it's more. I
do see what you mean. I mean, but that sounds a bit like those people who say, like, "Oh, we need another world war because it gets rid of bad blood." Do you know what I mean? It's it doesn't have to be
about world war. No. It's not about that. It's about the fact that, like, I want England to have the kind of independence to say, well, if, for example, like, this whole kind of huge argument between the Remainers and the Leavers. Well, do you know what? If we do leave and if we do succeed, congratulations, it's amazing. We were right. If we do fail because we fail our own doing, because we misrun a country, we've got bad culture, then so be it. That's the way it goes. Then we'll learn from that and then come back stronger.
As you reap, so you sow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
okay, yeah.
So I basically see it.
Yeah. Going back to the main man, Jordan Peterson, who was talking about his view on this, or he linked it to the story of the Tower of Babel, which I suppose he wouldn't he?
Yeah, cool,
so the Tower of Babel, of course, the the story from the Old Testament where men tried to build a tower up to heaven, and God scattered them for any linguist, it's a useful story from the Bible, scattered them to the four corners of the earth, and that's why we all speak different languages. So what you've got in the EU, or I would argue actually a lot of political unions like this, the USSR included, is a Tower of Babel type problem. When a structure gets too top heavy, it becomes unable to support itself. That's exactly what happened in the USSR, among other things. That's exactly what's happening with the EU right now.
Depoliticized.
Yeah, and not only that though. Look, so you were talking about the economical aspect. I mean, it's not immediately clear to me that countries like Germany, like the Netherlands, like France, which have a certain orderly European liberal kind of way of doing things where people follow the rules. It's not clear to me that those countries can be in the same union as a country like Greece. People in Greece don't pay their income taxes.
Exactly.
That's a huge problem. That's a really big problem. And, you can't be part of the same economic union, obviously. Definitely not the same currency. You're out of your mind.
Yeah, doesn't work at all. Well, that's a very nice heated discussion. I enjoyed that. Very clear. I haven't talked to a native about politics in about 10 years.
Jesus.
Yeah, 10 years.
We'll change that. Let's start up a new Mike and Paul
exactly
talk bollocks about politics.
Yeah,
talk about things we have no idea what we're talking about.
Bollocks about politics, that's the name.
.com. I have to be on Parler though, because we'll get kicked off YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just like, because one of the funny things is being a sort of English teacher, I know my subject really well. I know the language really well. I like, of course I'm native and fluent, but I really like that kind of practice with fellow Englishmen. Because especially with COVID, we couldn't go out, still can't to some extent. A lot of natives have left Russia, huge number, those working for language schools. And the other thing is that because I've gone online, predominantly I work from home now in my office. And so you just don't have that contact. And, when I talk to Russians or my friends, it's like that kind of same repertoire that you kind of go through again and again, and when you want to speak in that kind of with complexity, whether it's about politics, economics, or even like I do about psychology, it can be sometimes very difficult to do that, because I find that having been here for 15 years, I grade my English constantly. It's like, so
yeah, I relate to that somewhat, but that's changed for me recently. Like this is the whole idea of like my campfire sort of whole ethos is is gathering around and having just a genuine human conversation, and and it goes for the podcast as well. I mean, I'm sure you'll agree, I don't think we've tried to be scripted here. We haven't tried to make the right points. We sometimes we stumble over our words, but I like that. I like the mistakes. That's why I do like friend of mine, Anton, aka Yozhikov, who's been on the podcast before, he keeps telling me, you need to edit your podcast, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I'm like, I don't want to. I love it. I love the fact that that's the whole advantage of a podcast. It's not a TV show. I love the fact that there's mistakes, there's fuck ups, there's things that don't go quite right. We go down avenues that go nowhere. But that's what conversations like. That's what real.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think that's fair enough, because I think for our learners, when they actually do go to Blighty or travel abroad, they're never going to come across a conversation that's edited. Yeah. You're going to have to get used to the complexity, and that's something that every student always complains about. Like, I've been studying for 5 years, I went to England, understood nothing. Well, yeah, because you've been following that kind of edited textbook crap for so long. You never got used to reported, so connected speech. You never kind of learnt the sort of intricacies of some common slang that's that's widely used among natives. And so then you kind of go there, and it's like, of course, there's a shock to the system. You haven't been prepared well enough.
Well, speaking of which, we're going to do our live stream soon, aren't we? Although,
yeah, we should do it.
The live stream is scheduled before this podcast will have come out. So actually, hang on, when was that?
I'm free this week, by the way, completely. Just for everyone watching, yeah, I'm free actually for the next 2 weeks, and then I'm actually flying to the wonderful ecological paradise of Magnitogorsk.
Ah, lovely.
Yeah, wonderful place.
Send them my regards, will you?
Factory air. Yeah.
Gotta love it. All right. Well, let's okay. I think we'll wrap up now because we're going for a while. So we'll talk about this. Yeah, we're going about an hour and a half. Yeah, I know. Everyone says that. It's a temporal wormhole, this thing. Okay, let's speak after we finish taping.
All right,
we'll sort that live stream out, mate.
Okay, goodbye everyone. It was fantastic to be here, mate. Thank you for inviting me. It's such a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Ditto. Thanks very much, Paul, and see you when I see you.
Ta-ra, mate.